So, hi everyone. I'm Bridget Thorson. I'm the member collaborations editor here at INN, and I am thrilled to be hosting today's discussion. At INN, we have seen time and again how collaborations can supercharge your impact at a newsroom. And today we've got 5 wonderful speakers who are going to share their insights and lightning talks in just a moment. So these lightning talks are designed to surface helpful nuggets of what our panelists have learned through collaborating. And hopefully this will provide inspiration and guidance for how you can apply these lessons to your own work.
My name is Adam Ganeshow. I'm editor-in-chief at Mississippi Today in Jackson, Mississippi. It's a pleasure being here. Just am so thrilled to be invited to this panel in particular. I couldn't speak more highly of so many of the collaborations that our newsroom has had the great fortune of entering into and working through in our 5+ years of existence now. So as we were sort of thinking about this panel, this discussion, and how we were going to structure it, I think everyone decided that I would go first because we are just on the heels of some really great success from a very, I think, important and helpful collaboration to us. Mississippi Today was one of several newsrooms that won the 2021 Goldsmith Prize for Investigative Journalism this year. That was only because of the collaboration itself. The Marshall Project, as everyone here is very familiar with, they sort of were the spearhead lead on this collaboration. And for us, what it meant was ultimately producing our best ever work in our 5+ years of existence. How that worked, I know this isn't necessarily unusual for so many of you who have worked through these collaborations or partnerships before, but our reporters in Mississippi got a pretty crazy tip that something was amiss within our criminal justice system. That tip, after some very basic reporting, led us to learn that Mississippi had perpetuated what are effectively debtors' prisons. So people who can't pay for fines or court fees themselves were put in prison until they worked enough hours at minimum wage jobs to pay off their fines and fees and assessments. So the Marshall Project, our editors were sort of in touch with them already about some other things, and we thought that it was going to be perhaps beneficial for everyone involved if we could bring this to them, if they could help us work through it. I mentioned a second ago, this work would not have been possible without the Marshall Project, without this collaboration, and that's very true. Like many of you, as I suspect, we are sort of still a new-ish, small newsroom, nonprofit newsroom in a very rural state, Mississippi. Our resources just, is what it is. We don't have as many. Our editors didn't feel like they could kind of carry this story, didn't have the time, energy, or we didn't have the resources as a newsroom organization ourselves to carry this story in the way it needed to be carried. So this collaboration with the Marshall Project ended up getting the story not only across the finish line, but of course it just, our work with their editors and their data experts and reporters really made this thing sing. And that would not have been possible without the collaboration. As I was sort of thinking a little bit more about sort of Mississippi Today's work and our collaborations with newsrooms, organizations, both nationally, regionally, and of course within the state, it just kind of struck me that, thinking about the term collaboration itself can mean so many different things to different people. For instance, we have gone well out of our way in Mississippi since we launched to sort of boost the existing sort of legacy for-profit media, newspapers in particular, in the state. A great example of just some recent work that we've done with some of these local papers. That it might not even be a traditional quote unquote collaboration as we might all like to think about it or define it. But the Sun Herald, which is on the Mississippi Gulf Coast, it's a McClatchy paper. They do such great work. They obviously have not been immune to many of the challenges of a lot of the legacy papers across the country, but it's the second highest read, highest circulated paper in Mississippi, huge region of the coast. big for us and big for everyone. We just hired our first Gulf Coast reporter about 6 months ago, a little less than 6 months ago now. And part of that hiring process, so before we even drew up the job description, we had some discussions with the Sun Herald editors about, like, what do you need? What could we do to provide you with help that you aren't getting otherwise? So, like I said, that was about 6 months ago. We had the reporter start, and she has finished a couple larger projects, sort of long form pieces already that we worked in conjunction with the Sun Herald. They ended up running these on their Sunday front pages. They didn't necessarily have to offer us, reporting help or anything, but what they did was offer us photos. So it's not necessarily sort of from the start working sort of partnership. It can also be just sharing resources and thinking how you can creatively sort of work together and create the best possible journalism. So last thing I'll mention really briefly before I hand off my lightning session here is we have been in this great working collaboration for the last several months with Open Campus. Sarah at Open Campus is actually, I think, going to go next, so she can take it from here. But we wouldn't be able to cover higher ed as a beat in Mississippi. It was completely undercovered. We don't think it has been covered since the 90s full time without the support of Open Campus. And one quick thing I'll mention too, thinking about collaborations, is Open Campus offered us 50% of the salary support to create that position to begin with. But what we did, we took that money and had a local foundation here in Mississippi match it. So that's another sort of, it's not necessarily a traditional collaboration as we would think about in the traditional journalism sense, but it all goes hand in hand. It all is something that we consider on a daily basis. And yeah, could not be a bigger advocate for these collaborations.
Thank you so much, Adam. Congratulations on that work. And I also love that point about thinking expansively about resources. So yes, next I'm going to hand things off to Sarah. Please, everyone, pop your questions in the chat as something occurs to you as you're hearing from our panelists today. With that, Sarah, please introduce yourself, where you're from, and the nugget you'd like to share with our audience today.
Great, thanks so much, Bridget, and thanks so much, Adam. We love working with you guys too. I'm Sarah. I'm Sarah Hebel. I'm the co-founder and executive editor of Open Campus, and I'm also thrilled to be talking about collaborations. It's at the very core of the model of Open Campus, as Adam was actually starting to describe. For those of you who are not as familiar with us, we are a nonprofit news organization focused on higher education with a goal of strengthening the reporting on higher education that's being done across the country. And we do that through partnerships like those with Mississippi Today. We now work in 7 newsrooms across 6 states, and we put reporters in those newsrooms focused on covering higher education. We don't just put a body in the beat. As Adam said, we often pay part of the salary. And then we work hand in hand with those newsrooms and with those higher education reporters over time, week in and week out, to help them shape their higher education coverage, to help bring expertise to bear. We often talk about Open Campus as combining the strengths of a national newsroom that knows a subject matter deeply with local newsrooms that know place deeply. And we believe that together that creates more impactful journalism that gives people in those communities the information they need, the sophisticated information they need to advance change, to hold these critical institutions to their public missions. So for this lightning talk, I'm going to try to get at sort of the question that we get asked a lot. When you build an entire organization around partnerships, how do you pick those partners? And what is it that you're looking for? And how do you make sure that your missions are aligned? So mission alignment, of course, is essential. And mission alignment does not mean mission duplication, right? In fact, oftentimes differences are exactly what's great, right? You have to have core values, which I'll get to in a second, but you want to be filling gaps and helping each other build on your strengths. So by being in a place like Chalkbeat, Colorado, teeing up the next speaker as well, being in a place like Chalkbeat, Colorado, we can work with a local reporter on a story about how the state has failed working adults. The local reporter knows how to get to people with lived experiences. His network gets him there. The local editor knows a ton. Has encyclopedic knowledge of Colorado policy and the history of that. Open Campus then can bring the national context, national sources and data to bear that really put into context what's happening there and make it clearer and crystallize what Colorado is doing well, what it can be doing better. So to be able to get to the point where you're engaged in these collaborations, you often want to set up MOUs. And what I like to think about when we set those up is something like really focusing in on what's essential, right? Thinking about what your North Star is and why are you doing this in the first place? And so when we were first drafting these MOUs, we were focused not really on a whole laundry list of things because that makes these partnerships way too rigid and it doesn't open you up to the possibilities of new dimensions that you might be able to gain yourselves from different types of partnerships. What El Paso Matters needs and Public Source needs and Mississippi Today needs, they're all very different things. But if we have core values and are after the same things and want to make impact together, then that is what will make this partnership successful. So when we were thinking about what we really cared about, we boiled it down to two things. So our MOUs really just have two key things on them: enterprise reporting about higher education and regular communication. If we feel like we have both of those things happening and can make shared commitments to that, then kind of everything else around the edges can be worked out. So that's one aspect I'd like to emphasize, right? Just write down what you really care about. Then you can focus on that, hold fast to that, and then work out everything around that. Another aspect of picking partners is goal alignment and vision alignment. So where can you together make the biggest impact? What partners can you work with together to get to some of what Adam was talking about, where you can do really smart journalism together, where your strengths together will provide smart coverage of something both of you care about. So not only on the big enterprise things, but the week-to-week things like Adam was talking about, or like this Colorado example I mentioned. Another aspect of this is operational capacity. We think a lot about, the vacuum of we think about a lot of the vacuum of the coverage of higher education as a topic area, but also, and putting bodies on the beat is good. But also, as you all know, as those of you who run newsrooms, there's also an editing deficit. So we can come in and help fill that. Sometimes you might pick partners because you have a strength that they don't have, or they have one you don't have. You want to do a podcast together. Somebody has that specific ability that you don't have and you can learn from them, or you can bring data to bear. And then finally, I would just emphasize the point that Adam made at the end as well, that these are opportunities, these collaborations are really fundamentally opportunities for revenue growth and revenue distribution. When we partner as a national organization with local organizations, we can do several things at once. We can help funnel money from national funders to local organizations that they may not directly fund. We can help local news organizations like Mississippi Today make pitches on a specific topic area that a local funder cares about and bring new money into journalism. And then it helps us as a national news organization to have a diversification of funding sources in places where we're working. So together, it creates a virtuous cycle, and we're really excited to be working in these collaborations across the country.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And I feel like I'm hearing a lot about flexibility and carefully considering sort of what you can bring to the table and how everyone can contribute. And with that, we're going to move right to our next lightning panelist, and that is Nicole.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be participating in this panel. My name is Nicole Avery Nichols, and I am the editor-in-chief of Chalkbeat, which is a nonprofit news organization with 9 bureaus across the country. I am very new to this position. I started in March, so I'm celebrating this week, in fact, my 90-day anniversary. I came to Chalkbeat and education journalism after a 20-year stint working my way up over around the ranks of legacy media. So I'm going to tell you a little bit of a story here. I came from a very intense and competitive media landscape, like most of us, where you felt like you were not only fighting to connect with audience, but you were fighting for page view dominance, and you're also fighting for jobs and the very financial viability of the organization. That's really very real for most journalists, all journalists at this point. So collaboration wasn't exactly, if I'm telling the truth, at the fore of my priority list for several years. Really survival was, that is, until the coronavirus pandemic swept in. So early in the pandemic in 2020, as the editor in charge of coordinating health coverage for the Detroit Free Press, it became apparent that for journalists, our journalists, telling the story of the pandemic and providing the public with reliable information, we just needed more help. The case counts in Michigan and across the country kept rising. The death toll, particularly among Black and Brown communities, was frankly unbelievable. Our team was chasing news 24/7 and fighting for reliable information at a time when getting straight answers was virtually impossible. So one of my coworkers pitched a health partnership to me with a local nonprofit news organization. And even though I knew all the journalists involved, I was hesitant at first, honestly. His relationships were not my relationships. I was asking questions. You've heard the two speakers speak previously about mission alignment. I was just wondering about those things. But after furloughs were announced and journalists were being laid off across the country, our company had a really aggressive sort of 6-week furlough schedule. We began really having those trust building conversations. I said some prayers. I burned a lot of incense. We put our intentions in writing and dove into this collaboration. And really, it was a surprise. Collectively, working together in an actual crisis, like a bona fide crisis, we were able to cover more ground and provide more valuable health information to a larger swath of the state. And specifically for my newsroom, it enabled me to direct more newsroom resources to the covering of the pandemic's impact on communities of color and underrepresented people. So it was a win-win. Started out as a relationship of each media organization providing 3 reporters. So it was 6 reporters core. Then we were joined by another nonprofit radio organization. They provided 2 more reporters. So it fluctuated from a team of 6 to 2 or 3 at the very end, depending upon how the news was flowing. So coming straight off of that experience and joining Chalkbeat, I'm fortunate to be integrated into a news organization where collaboration is part of the culture. And once again, I've been surprised and frankly inspired by the results of some of the collaborative work that is happening in our news organization. You've heard we do collaborate with Open Campus. All of our local bureaus have nurtured valuable collaborative relationships with nonprofit news organizations and legacy media. We partnered with 7 newsrooms in Chicago for a year-long government accountability project. We collaborate with the city in New York. We partnered with Axios Denver and Open Campus, and Chalkbeat has partnered with AP several times this year to tell sweeping stories about how the pandemic has affected American schools and students. Consider the impact of a Chalkbeat AP story published in September that revealed the stark divisions among who was able to return to school buildings and who was not. We were the first to show definitively that race was a strong predictor of which public schools were offering in-person instruction. That story was based on surveys of 650 school districts. I know we're on a time limit, but I have to hit that fact.
Yeah.
So someone had to call, email, check websites, and answer a dozen questions for 650 districts. It was a massive reporting undertaking that was split between the two news organizations for the benefit of the greater good. You just don't get that without collaboration. As you can tell, I am a convert and I'm happy for surprises.
Thank you so much, Nicole. I love to hear about that initial hesitancy and also the importance of that mission alignment to achieve something for the greater good. All right, we are moving right along to our next lightning panelist. Chris, would you please introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks for having me. I'm Christopher Baxter. I'm the Executive Director and Editor-in-Chief of Spotlight PA, an independent, nonpartisan newsroom covering the state government and urgent statewide issues in Pennsylvania. The mission of Spotlight PA is to hold public and private forces to account through unique accountability and investigative journalism that informs, drives change, and improves our state and our democracy. We're a team of about 17 with a dozen or so reporters, and we've been in operation for about 2 years. The Spotlight PA Collaborative Network now includes more than 70 newsroom partners in all corners of Pennsylvania. They include legacy newspapers, hyperlocal news websites, public radio and television stations, and other local collaborative partnerships. All of our partners have access to all of our work at no cost through an MOU model, not just a steal our stuff approach. And in return, they provide us some non-monetary benefits, as well as a massive distribution network that has allowed us to rapidly scale Spotlight PA and build in a short amount of time a growing and with lots of opportunity membership base. So now we're examining possibilities already to expand through a hub and spoke model to open local and regional Spotlight PA hubs saddled right up against the media that's left in those areas. In terms of reporting, we frequently pair with our partners on stories where it works to the benefit of the reporting, which speaks to strategy, which is a really important part of why are we collaborating. The why is really important. We've also a few times had reporters from other newsrooms temporarily detached to our team, such as at the beginning of the pandemic when we formed a statewide strike team. So overall, I'm a real geek about the organizational and business revenue strategy around building what I call win-win collaborative models and how nonprofits can work alongside traditional legacy newsrooms, which in some corners of nonprofit news is a little taboo. How these networks can provide faster routes to scale, and so much more. So I'm happy to answer anything about those questions and of course the journalism too as we move forward. When I was hired in 2019 to create Spotlight PA from what at the time was basically 2 pieces of paper, I spent a lot of time and was very purposeful about messaging this new project as a collaborative partner and not a competitor. And this was a real critical starting point because I had heard from some other projects across the country that they were hamstrung at the start because that messaging was unclear from the media that existed in the ecosystem. So coming into Pennsylvania, the landscape was that basically we had a lot of local and regional outlets with no true statewide player. And so it was important for us to come in and message to folks in the market a few things. One, we are not here to degrade what's left of the ecosystem. That is the opposite of what we want to do. We are here as a resource to you, and we are here to fill gaps because we can all agree that there's huge gaps. And of course, the one we were really targeting was the gap in coverage of the state capitol. The press corps had diminished to a real frightening degree. In fact, when we launched Spotlight PA, we effectively doubled the press corps in Harrisburg. And so we are here as a collaborative partner. We're not here to compete. We're here to fill gaps. We're here to produce what you know is high quality, accountability, investigative journalism that will not only help us build a new newsroom and help inform our readers, but will enhance your news product and your value proposition to your readers. So I spent a lot of time thinking about how we position Spotlight so as to put Spotlight on a trajectory for long-term sustainability while also benefiting the partner network. And that's what I talk about, a true in-depth analysis of the win-win proposition and how you position the organization to get there. as part of those conversations, I had to address, and we can, there's many more, we can talk about a few. I had to address what I call kind of myths of collaboration. And we, you know, if you've tried this, you've probably heard it. You'll steal my audience. You'll steal my members. You'll steal my newsletter subscribers. But wait, don't we have to compete to be the dominant player? Or we can't just give away our content. And all of these concerns that existed among partners at the beginning, and frankly, none of them actually blocked anyone from joining with us, but some of them had some concerns. None of them have played out. Spotlight PA content, even though we're growing a new brand, a new audience, has not detracted from anyone's audience. It has not detracted from anyone's subscription or membership goals. In fact, it is a very positive driver of new subscription and membership at many of our partners because of the quality of the content. It hasn't affected anyone's newsletter subscribers. It has offered a friend and so much more resource for newsrooms wanting to do more in-depth work, wanting a partner that knows how to do that kind of work. And as I wrote in a Neiman Reports piece last year, we just can't afford competition anymore. It doesn't make sense. We shouldn't have 8 people chasing the same story of the day at the legislature. When one person could do it, we could all share it, and then 7 others could focus on all these other areas that aren't getting any attention. It just doesn't make sense anymore. And that is really, I think, at the heart of what we have, you know, the torch we bear every day here in Pennsylvania. Like, let's do it together. Let's spread the resources. Let's share it. We just cannot afford it. And you know, that's the heart of what we're doing. So happy to talk more.
Thank you so much, Chris. We love that. And last, I would like to turn to Ron. Ron, please introduce yourself and share your insights on collaborations.
Thank you, Bridget. My name is Ron Smith, and I'm the editor and project director of the Milwaukee Neighborhood News Service. We've been around for 10 years, and we are, I call it, at the intersection of education and information. We're housed at Marquette University, but editorially independent, and we cover central city neighborhoods in Milwaukee, so mainly African-American and Latino. And I just want to give a shout out to Sharon, who's our founding editor, who is working at INN and has been a blessing for our organization and continues to be a blessing. But what we do is we make sure that we cover an audience that some people call marginalized, but I call misrepresented. These are, you know, we are there when other media come into our neighborhoods for drama and trauma, shootings, things like that. We want to paint a complete portrait through professional evidence-based journalism. And what's different from, I think, you guys is I feel like we're beauty on a budget. We have 6 part-time reporters and editors and me, and I also have to teach at Marquette. And so there's power in collaboration. And what you guys have heard, I think if I could synthesize it, it's 2 things. Making sure you know your mission and that you are competing or completing, not competing, completing, but not competing. So what does that mean for us? So we work with the Wisconsin Watch, Wisconsin Center for Investigative Journalism in Madison. They are an investigative-based nonprofit newsroom that covers issues not only in Wisconsin, but across a national realm about explanatory journalism investigations. And we're this hyper-local institution. And what we do is we collaborate on a project called News 414, which is a text-based delivery news service that serves 18, well, I can't say 18, serves Milwaukee residents. And we give them information about food, housing, voter registration, news that they can use to navigate their lives. And so we did all the things that I heard Sarah talk about. Like, we knew our mission, we know what we're trying to do, we're all in sync. But I don't want anyone to leave this conversation to think that collaboration is easy. It takes work, right? You got to put the work in. And part of it's just like in journalism, we're taught to know our audience. You have to know your newsrooms. So here, you know, we are part-time at NNS, 6 people. Wisconsin Watch has maybe 13, 14, a $1.3 million budget. We got $150,000. And so we run at a different speed. They're an investigative unit. We come out every day. And so how we communicate has taken work, right? We have to, I would say there's several things you need to do to make a partnership work. And one of it is learning the culture of a newsroom. There's no magic wand. You have to learn the players, how they work, and talk about the ground rules. Second is having a check-in. So we've had organically such a wonderful experience with Wisconsin Watch that it is the best partnership I could ever want. When I had COVID, when I've had deaths in the family, I appreciated the fact that Wisconsin Watch would say, hey, Ron, do you need help editing? I didn't, but I love the fact that I know that if I'm down and out, I could. Or I could help them with a board member in Milwaukee that they want and say, nope, that's not a good person. It's not a good fit. So we help each other. But just like a family, you're always going to have these moments when you don't always agree with things. And being able to air that and to be in a safe place where you can say, hey, maybe we should do it this way. We are 80% people of color. Wisconsin Watch is not. And so Wisconsin Watch is very commendable, and they really want to talk about diversity and inclusion. We talk about it all the time. We talk about power dynamics and things like that. But these conversations can be tough and rough. And we always leave better for it. But I just want to know, I guess my parting statement would be, because I want to get to the questions, is that put in the work and don't be afraid of the work. It's nothing magical that's not going to happen. If you don't put in the work, you don't get results with anything else. And so collaboration is important, but having those relationships and maintaining those relationships are just as important. And so I would encourage everyone to just don't think of it like, oh, we're in sync with mission, that everything will just magically happen. It takes that work of checking in, challenging your assumptions, and figuring out a way to navigate conflict. Because no matter, and our newsrooms get along splendidly, but no matter how good your newsroom gets along, there's going to be chances that there's going to be controversy, just like it would be in your home in a family. Like I beat my brother up every day, right? I still love him, but there's always fights. So I just would encourage everyone to know that if we can do it as a part-time newsroom that's been around for 10 years, you can do it as well.
Thank you, Ron. And I'm just going to reiterate that wonderful phrase, complete, not compete. Complete, not complete. Thank you so much to our wonderful panel. We've got 10 minutes left for Q&A. Great job. We did awesome on time. I read recently that extroverts think while they talk and introverts think and then talk. So we're going to have a very comfortable silence here to give everyone a chance to think and then type their questions for the Q&A. I know we threw a lot of information at you really fast, so I'm going to give you just a few moments to digest that, and then we will plunge right into our Q&A portion. Thank you. I am tracking the questions that have come in, and we will be getting to those soon. I also invite you to consider, what do you want to leave today's session with? What would you like to take with you? Do you need to make the case? I'll think for just a moment. Thank you, Penny. All right. Keep those questions coming in. I would like to start by actually highlighting a wonderful offer that was made in the chat. And we are so lucky to be joined today by Stephanie Murray from the Center for Cooperative Media. Stephanie, I'm going to bring you on up to the virtual stage for just a moment here. If you could share that offer with our audience for today.
Sure thing. Bridget asked me this and I was like, oh, I haven't really combed my hair, but okay. So it's so awesome to see everyone here. And I love hearing about your projects and your work. And yeah, you're doing amazing stuff. So Heather Bryant had wanted to do a collaboration policy session at ONA, but they didn't pick it up. But we'd love to do it anyway. So I dropped this link in the chat and I'll do it again now. She set up this form. Anyone who responded that they wanted to be part of that discussion about collaboration policies for your newsroom, drop your contact info in that form and we'll get it set up. And we'll do a co-creation session together. The form also links to her very early draft policy too. So thanks, Bridget.
Thanks, Stephanie. Appreciate that offer. All right, let's dive into the questions. There's a lot here. We can start at the chat. Let's start at the very beginning. A very good place to start. We have a question here about how organizations have successfully approached funders to support collaborations. So if any of our panelists want to maybe just pop their hand and I can call on you, have you successfully approached funders to support your collaborations? Yes, Sarah, go for it.
I'll just emphasize a little bit more about the collaboration that Adam and I talked about in the success we had in matching some funding at a local level. And I think, one of the things that's key there is for two organizations to have missions that together really speak to the organization you're pitching to. So the organization we pitch to cares a lot about Mississippi and it cares a lot about higher education. And so together, I could write a concept note that was in the language of higher education that was knowing about some of the big issues. And the editors of Mississippi Today could also add to that an audience of people and knowledge of people there and what they need in their coverage, so that together we are going after the same thing. And again, it comes back to a lot of the key things that are good in relationships. It's just very specific, clear communication about where the money's going, how you're going after it together, and how that is going to help both of you.
Anybody else want to jump in before I queue up our next question? Yeah, Ron.
And I would add too that when Wisconsin Watch and NNS started participating together, we had some ground rules as well. It's like, you can't go after our funders. Like, we're going to work together to go after new funders because we are better when we are together, but we cannot cannibalize each other's funding, right? And because that was a big issue. So again, making sure you're clear about what you can do and what you shouldn't do, and having those conversations way ahead of time will stop the drama.
I love that. Thank you, Ron. And I'm hearing so much about the importance of really understanding mission, which is, of course, something that these newsrooms do so well. Here's one that I think really can resonate for a number of people in the room here. 3 years in, I've been unable to land a successful collaboration. Potential partners are busy, we lose focus, and it's been very difficult to bring a project to a finished product. Any ideas on how to get started or find that first big win? Yeah, go for it, Chris.
I would say if you're having that trouble, start small. Don't shoot for the moon. Start on something small, a smaller story, something that's easily executable, just to establish that relationship with the partner, which is a really important first step. We have so many partners and not all of them team up with us on reporting, but it's interesting that those that do, they all follow the same kind of path, which is that we find ourselves at bumping into each other on a story. We discuss why strategically it would make sense to team up, meaning like we have access or can bring this to the reporting, you have access, can bring that, or with two people we can get this quicker or break this story. And then we work it through its process, and then pretty much every time afterwards I'll hear from the partner and say, hey, that was really great. That wasn't scary. And then once that's established, they're much more willing and often do after that come back, and because now they have the framework for why the collaboration made sense, and that's why this sort of strategic element of the collaboration, as Ron talked about and others have talked about, is so important. If you don't understand why you're trying to strike that collaboration, or you can't clearly articulate the value to you, but also the value to your partner, that's often where the breakdown happens, or where you end up in a collaboration that's really terrible. And let's be honest, they can be really, really terrible if they go bad.
I would add just take that one baby step, right? You don't always have to, think about it as crawling before you run. So, for example, we've been wanting to increase our name recognition in Milwaukee. And so we've gotten together with the local TV station, WTMJ, and we're working on a collaboration on a housing beat where we would, they would provide the video, we would do some of the legwork. And that got really overwhelming because they wanted to do so many things. And I said, let's just work on one story and go from there. And that's what we're doing. And we don't know where it's going to lead us. We know that we trust them and they trust us, but just working on that one story with their reporter who's new to town, bringing her to our meetings, I think it's going to open up many other opportunities. So don't see it as you have to run that marathon, just crawl.
And one little thing I'd like to add, being the newbie to the group, is sort of the cultivation of relationship. Just freshly coming into Chalkbeat and reviewing all of these wonderful and robust collaborations across 8 states, sort of how the business side and the journalism side sort of cultivates and pours into relationships without necessarily having a deliverable, like an immediate deliverable, but just checking on folks, floating ideas, treating it almost as an extension of, the newsroom brand. That's been really inspiring to me.
Thank you, Nicole. We have time for 2 more questions. And I'd also thank you, Scott. We've got a question in the chat from John Eric about successful collaborations involving news organizations and university journalists. So please, if anybody knows of any of those, Stephanie, if you wouldn't mind responding in the chat. But first I want to move to this question about community assessments, and then we'll wrap up with 2 related questions really about how you make this happen logistically. So question here is, best practices for getting community assessments in order to inform potential newsroom collaborations. And I love how much thought people are putting into these initial stages of the work. What all did you do, or did you do anything to understand the communities you're looking to serve ahead of putting together a collaboration? Adam.
I'll jump in. I don't have a ton of we don't have a great track record yet, but we've been sort of in this process the last few weeks. The Mississippi Delta is this very remote agricultural area of the state. It's the blackest area of the state. It's the poorest area of the state, one of the poorest regions of America. It's obviously, as you could assume, it's incredibly undercovered, really uncovered, if you want to go that far. So we want to use our resources and our relationships and sort of our record of producing high quality journalism to build out a Delta bureau. So the last few weeks, we've been having these conversations with stakeholders in the Delta. We've been very intentional about who those people are. Everyone from the local activists sort of doing the work on the ground, who have been doing the work on the ground, all the way up to politicians who have obtained and perpetuated a lot of power and often haven't used it for good. And we're asking them sort of the same basic questions. I mean, obviously you can't ask the same people the same questions, but really trying to understand how we can serve that region, the people who live there. And one thing that I've personally been zoned in on in my conversations with these Delta stakeholders is, where are you reading, consuming your news right now? And a lot of times what we're hearing is, if they need news, they're going to some of these smaller local newspapers that have one staffer, one reporter on staff. If even that, maybe they're sharing staff with a couple other regional newspapers or whatever. And for us, like I said, we haven't produced anything yet, but we're in this very intentional sort of phase right now where we're trying to determine if it's feasible for us to partner with some of these local papers across the region. And, so far, frankly, we've decided probably it's not in our best interest to do that because of their readership and who they are and the kind of coverage that they've produced. But there are a couple that have been sort of shining lights there. So I think just being intentional about having those conversations, getting to know people, be open with people about what you would like for your organization, and ultimately, hopefully, what they could get out of a potential collaboration. And that's just be intentional. I guess that's my very basic advice there.
I love that. Be intentional. Now, for anyone watching the time, don't panic. We're in a break period now. You're not missing anything. Everything's fine. So if you need to scoot, feel free to scoot. I'm going to provide us with one final question today. Before I do, I just want to let you know, if you're interested in connecting to learn more about how INN is working to facilitate collaborations, and this applies whether or not you're an INN member, you can feel free to reach out to me. My email is bridget@inn.org. So the word bridge with a T at inn.org, and I'll pop that in the chat as well. Please reach out. I'd love to hear from you. Okay, so our final two questions, panelists, I hope you're okay to hang on for 2 more minutes. Thank you, guys. It's really 2 related questions, and I'll just open this up to whoever wants to hop in. How do you allocate internal resources when you need to balance the needs of partnership with your day-to-day work? So like the beast that sometimes needs to be fed, right? And then related to that, who takes responsibility for things like keeping communications open between organizations? Do you have regularly scheduled meetings? So anyone who wants to hop in there about just how you do this kind of work when you have other needs to meet as well.
Go ahead, sir.
Nicole.
Okay, thank you. I can just speak to Chalkbeat. It is really built into the process. It's part of the culture, and it's seen as really important to do that communication and that reach out and that maintenance. So it's on our to-do list.
That sounds good.
You know, since it's at the core of what we do, it is our day-to-day, but I would say these things help. Regularly scheduled meetings, just having that as a set thing that you're doing that's on your calendar, it's harder to take off than put on, right? And Slack. I know that's basic, but you can be in the work with somebody, you can fire off a quick response. If you have open channels like that, then it makes it much simpler to keep it going.
But it's hard, right? As the person who, it's just me. And so when people say they want to partner, I'm just like, no, I already have 3 hours of meetings every day. And I now got to go at 8 o'clock and start editing someone's story. That might take 2 hours. So that means that any partnership I enter has to be purposeful, has to fit that mission and those goals. And so don't, just because the frog kisses you, don't necessarily kiss it back, right? Remember what you need to sustain, because every organization is different in terms of infrastructure. Don't take on more than you can handle.
Anyone have any final thoughts for the group? I think don't take on more than you can handle is a great note to end it on today.